Welcome to the July 2019 ML+UX event. Is everything good? Are we all recording and everything? Yes. Sweet. Awesome. This will be on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it again later. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm super excited to invite you all to, we have a really exciting panel and speakers lined up around AI for social good. This is something that I have been super looking forward to for like the last year. I've been talking to Suzanne and Anna and Marcel about this, so excited to have them here to share their knowledge and all of the cool stuff that's like special about their domain with us. And also a big thank you to the Salesforce.org and .com for hosting us in this space. This is awesome. Just a little bit about the agenda and what you can expect. So, hey, doors open, socializing. We did it. Nice. You guys get some good food? Yeah? Cool. Yeah, nice. Great. I love tacos, so great job. So I'm going to do a quick overview about what is ML+UX. Then Salesforce is going to do a welcome. We're going to do first Salesforce.org, and then we're going to move to Intel with Anna Bethke, and then we'll do a panel discussion. We do have pre-prepared questions, and then you'll be tweeting in any questions that you have, and we'll do Twitter on the fly if you're not familiar. And then more social hour. Cool. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. Oh, and if you need bathrooms, restrooms are out there to the right, and then through the doors, and then walk a little bit past the elevators. Is that correct? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So, yeah. So, just really quickly, who are we? Hi, I'm Michelle. That's me. That's what I look like. Look, ta-da. I do UX and data science, and while I'm the only one up here representing the machine learning and UX community, there's actually a whole leadership board of people who actually help create these events, and they're probably some of the folks you might recognize who helped check you in earlier, yeah. So big shout out to all of our volunteers too. I know we had a massive amount of Salesforce interns that volunteered to help us, so thank you so much, Salesforce interns, and big shout out to all the folks who make this possible. This is also a fellowship project funded by the Center for Technology, Society, and Policy and Algorithmic Fairness and Opacity Working Group. If this is of all interest to you and you're like, oh, I like all those words that are on the screen and I want to learn more, great, you should totally check them out or find me afterwards. I'm happy to share a little bit about them. But really big thank you to Salesforce, our speakers, Suzanne, Marcel, also Anna, but really Amy, Lana, Molly, Emily, really all the folks, Katie, who helped make this all possible. Can we give them a round of applause? I know this is, well, first off, this venue is awesome. And secondly, it's always such a treat to be able to host an event here. It's so cool. So big thank you to Salesforce for letting us host it in the Salesforce Tower. So awesome. Just really quickly, how many of you, this is your first ML+UX event? Oh, welcome. It's so nice to have you. I know some of you might be thinking, great, machine learning, UX, those cool terms, those don't really go together, but they do, and we're here to kind of show how they do. When I typically talk about this, I talk about like how do we use data to inform and drive UX design decisions, but also how do we, on the UX side, think about ways to make our data and machine learning experiences more transparent, allow for more control for our end users, and kind of like, I'm just put up a giant data and UX up there, but what I'm actually talking about when I say UX is more than just visual design. It's interaction design, it's copywriting, voice user interface design, information architecture, all the things that go into really designing the experience. Same thing for the data up there if you do machine learning or whatever. I'm just boiling it up to data. So machine learning, artificial intelligence, data analysis, even stats. So we're really about sharing how these two fields can come together and make really cool and immersive products like these. So these are some of my favorites. We have the Pinterest visual search. I know if you've already been, sorry. These are some of the most engaging examples, so I really like these ones. But Pinterest, I think, is awesome because it's like, oh, cool, you like pizzas, and it has like a vector of other images that are like pizzas, so you can just receive the search, and it feels like a seamless interaction, right? So cool. The machine learning behind that probably was like a lot of computer vision and all that stuff, but it feels like a seamless experience. Or the Google Type Ahead for the keyboard, where it helps you find the perfect gift for partying if you got into law school. Love that example. And Google's Quick Draw and Auto Draw, I think that's a really great case study too. So these are some examples. And our vision too, in bringing all of us together is really to create a collaborative environment between UX, data science, and everyone in between. And we aim to organize a community that helps foster cooperation, creativity, and learning across these disciplines, and really just to create a space to discuss like cool human-centered machine learning, share ideas, resources. So I also hope that you don't think that at 9 o'clock this event ends. Like, I hope that you turn to somebody, make a cool new friend, and you like feel so inspired to go grab coffee with them in between now and our August event. We really hope to foster these conversations, and so you guys feel so inspired and you can learn something. This is a cool emerging field. We're all doing something awesome. No one here is an expert in both machine learning and UX. That's like a lot of experting, so we all can learn from each other. So cool, that's like what machine learning and UX is, but what do you all actually do? Hello, you're signed up for one of our tech talks, surprise. So we typically do tech talks, which are really like deep dives into best practices and like how people in the field are tackling really cool, new, immersive machine learning UX experiences. And sometimes we do regular networking and happy hours and stuff too, really just with the goal to meet people and create space for cool folks. Yeah, and we've been really lucky to partner with a bunch of really cool people. Look, that was like us. We all raised our hand and we were all happy. Look, it's us. Aha. Oh, look, it's Salesforce again at the old place. Yeah, so we've been really fortunate to partner with a bunch of really great sponsors. Big shout out to Salesforce. I think this is our 3rd event that we've hosted with Salesforce, so awesome. I think it's so, so cool. Thank you for being such a huge supporter of the ML/UX community and also doing really cool ML/UX stuff. If you haven't seen, we posted the past ones on our YouTube channel, so check them out. Yeah, so you're here at the ML/UX meetup. What? I guess this isn't a surprise because you made it. So if you want to see some of our past events, you can go to meetup.com/MLUX SF. I'm giving you the URL because it's very hard to search for it on the meetup.com interface, so MLUX SF. But if you're interested in finding out more information about us, we have MLUXSF.com that has some of our key videos, and if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can sign up there. Like I mentioned, we do have a YouTube channel. You just can go to bit.ly/MLUX YouTube or our Twitter, which is actually how you will be tweeting in your questions tonight if you have questions for our panel. So twitter.com/MLUX SF. I hope my phone starts buzzing with all y'all following me, being like, oh yeah, awesome. I tweet out really cool articles. It's really fun. We actually have a group of people who do it, so it's great if you're interested in the field. So great. Also, by being here, you agree to our code of conduct, committing to a harassment-free environment. But really, I just want to stress too that ML/UX can't happen without you. Like, I am up here, and sure, I could host this event for like me and like 30 people, but it's really awesome to get all y'all here and learning and sharing your insights with each other, with me. And if you want to share it widely and be a speaker at some of our events, we would love that. If you're a designer working in machine learning, if you're a data scientist solving problems around experience, whatever, anyone in between, you think that it's cool and you want to share doing AI for social good, awesome. Come up, say hi. We are always looking for new speakers. So also, if you just don't even want to speak, but you just want to volunteer, that's awesome. Please come volunteer. Volunteers, don't you have so much fun? Yeah. Oh, they're taking photos and stuff. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. Yeah. So no ML/UX experience needed to volunteer. And if you want to give talks, if you also want to sponsor a venue, we're always looking for that as well. You can also give us feedback too. We're humans at MLUXSF.com. Kind of funny because we use the robot emoji all the time, but we're the humans on it. So, haha. So now you can't forget. So great. Oh, great. So like I mentioned, we are all about community building. So it would be a huge miss if you don't meet someone here tonight. So we're going to do a quick icebreaker. Turn to someone next to you and go ahead to your name, why you're here, and what's the coolest ML or UX enabled feature or product you've seen recently? All right. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Not to stop you from your mingling and your friendship. Wow. I'm so impressed by how quickly you all get so quiet. So thank you. Do you meet someone cool? Yeah? Oh, I'd be worried if people were like, no. Oh, no. Yeah, I know. It's awesome, right? I think that it's just so cool, the types of folks who show up, and everyone, like every time I meet someone who's doing something really, really cool in like an emerging field, and I had no idea about it. So thank you all so much for coming. Glad you got to meet each other. Also, like I mentioned, I sincerely hope that you don't think like, okay, it's 9 o'clock, see ya, MLUX. Like I really hope that you've met someone who you're like, yeah, let's go grab coffee, let's meet up after this. Awesome. Cool. So that's all that I'm going to do for right now. I would love to turn it over to Marcel from Salesforce.org. Awesome. Thank you so much, Marcel, for speaking. Thank you so much to Salesforce and Salesforce.org for sharing their insights, and to Intel. So we're going to start the speaker portion, then we'll move into the panel. And if you feel so inclined, you can tweet at us at MLUX SF. Cool. Take it away.
Thank you. Okay, I preemptively apologize. I'm going to be doing a little bit of juggling between my laptop, and so I apologize in advance. Just as a quick intro, I'm Marcel Christian. I'm Principal UX Designer at Salesforce.org. I focus specifically on Education Cloud, and I have since I joined in 2015. And if you're interested, we are hiring for a number of different roles in product delivery. So you can link salesforce.com/company/careers, or you can just Google Salesforce.org jobs. You'll find us. Okay, quick agenda for the day. I'm going to be talking a bit about what is Salesforce.org, why we've created Education Cloud, UX specifically at Education Cloud, as well as providing a bit of a case study on how data science and UX collaborated on a recruiting and admission solution. Okay. So technology is the most powerful equalizer of our time. It provides access to data, knowledge, and above all, connections. We believe that everyone who wants to change the world should have the technology to do so. So in 1999, Salesforce created or spearheaded the 1-1-1 model, where we donate 1% of our product, our profit, and our time. And that really laid the foundation for Salesforce.org today. So our path to impact, we've given our customer communities are continuing to grow their social impact, and we believe that they deserve a designated cloud to unlock all of their potential. We've so far provisioned 40,000 nonprofits, K-12 and higher education institutions with Salesforce products and instances at a pretty steep discount. We've also invested $260 million in grants, and our Salesforce employees have volunteered 3.8 million hours collectively. So why Education Cloud? So there's changes across the workforce, education, and technology spaces that really are reshaping the experience of education for students. For one, the workforce is changing. So lifelong learning is becoming increasingly important for all of us. And 65% of students who are entering school today will actually end up working in jobs that don't presently exist. And education, the nature of education itself is also changing, specifically in higher ed. We have a lot more students who fit a non-traditional umbrella. So it's not just your standard high school senior who's 18 years old going off to school. Increasingly, we're seeing people that are in their well into their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and need to be continuing to, either through micro-credentialing or other ways, continue to build new skills. And so students who aren't necessarily in that traditional mold have different expectations of their education institutions. So that's one of the considerations as they continue to change the face of education overall. And lastly, technology is changing. Obviously, we've seen the rise of cloud, mobile, and social. And now, obviously, with data and analytics becoming increasingly important. So education institutions have always had the advantage of that they have a lot of student data, but they don't necessarily have a mechanism of harvesting and processing it in a way that's actionable. So the solution is bringing the world's #1 constituent relationship management platform to education. So 97% of Fortune 100 companies use Salesforce, and 96% of US News' most innovative schools use Salesforce as well. Okay, so CRM, which is Constituent Relationship Management, is a technology for managing all college and system relationships and interactions between students, faculty, and staff. CRM-based solutions enable institutions to cultivate more meaningful relationships with their students and personalized relationships that drive student success across the student lifecycle from prospect to alumni. This also increases collaboration across campus and breaks down departmental silos with 360-degree views of each and every student, alumni, donor, and constituent. So having that connected student data is the foundation for creating more personalized and relevant experiences for students. With CRM solutions, our customers are able to eliminate data silos and bring together data from different sources like the learning management systems, student information systems, financial aid. And that's really what makes CRM different from point solutions, is that it creates that 360-degree view for every student across their life cycle. And so in terms of product, Education Cloud includes the education data architecture, which is the foundation for all of our point solutions, as well as bespoke point solutions for recruiting and admissions use cases, student success, as well as advancement and fundraising. And so our impacts, we work with institutions of all sizes. That goes from community colleges to private four-year institutions, online schools, and many others. And some of the impact, positive impact that we've seen, and probably the most important thing is 88% of our customers have said that Salesforce has improved their ability to achieve their mission. So we're seeing things from faster response rates to students, higher yields from admit to commit from a recruiting perspective, increases in alumni engagement, marketing campaign impact, and student retention. So user experience at salesforce.org. Our vision as a team is to deliver trusted, integrated, and engaging design-driven innovation in enterprise software for the greater good. Ultimately, what we want to do is provide solutions that are proactive and predictive, as well as personalized additions to the lives of our users and a value for the user, usefulness and desirability, and not just on their technological innovation alone. Our design solutions put the power of the driving forces of the fourth industrial revolution, like connectivity and intelligence, into the hands of nonprofit and education institutions. So the design lifecycle. I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with design thinking or design thinking methodologies, but the goal of design thinking is to implement solutions that integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and requirements from business success. Design thinking is a solution-based and iterative problem-solving process that's used in ideation and development. And design thinking draws from the designer's toolkit to essentially fully understand the user's problem, explore a wide range of possible solutions, and iterate extensively through prototyping and testing. So the innovation sweet spot, which comes from IDEO, is where desirability, viability, and feasibility meet. So let's do a quick dive into what the stages of design lifecycle translate in terms of actual outputs. So for our actual process, which again is inspired by IDEO, Stanford's D School, all these different resources, we essentially are moving from problem definition to solution design. So in the discovery phase, we're gathering data on business objectives, the marketplace, existing experiences, and users. So we're trying to essentially build as much context as possible on the problem. We define based on the data collection that we do, the data gathering, we do data analysis, then define the problem. So that will result, in collating design solution objectives and user activities, their problems, and their goals based on what we did in discovery. As we transition to the solution design phase, the design phase starts with creating design solutions and assets based upon the problem definition. So that can be starting to get into a visual interaction design, information architecture, getting eventually into interactive prototypes. But ultimately, what we want to make sure that we do before we start handing things off to development is we're trying to make sure that the problems that we're solving with our design solutions actually are solving the problems of our users. So there's an evaluation phase where we're essentially taking the assets that we've created and pressure testing them with our users to make sure that they're actually meeting their needs, because it's a lot less expensive and time-consuming to make changes in design assets than it is in live code. In the last phase, after iterating based on the feedback from users, is to actually ultimately hand off to product management, developers, and other stakeholders. Okay, so in practice, so generative research, so everything, let me go back. So everything that I'm going to be covering moving forward will map to this life cycle. So I'll be kind of speaking to it in terms of what we actually do tactically, and then the case study for recruiting admissions will also follow this as well. So in the problem definition phase, as I mentioned, we do generative research and data gathering. So all these activities are performed to understand business goals and market opportunities, as well as the goals, activities, and pain points of our users. Some of the activities that happen during that process could be internal stakeholder interviews during kickoffs, competitor marketplace audits, and then, actually conducting user interviews, user surveys, focus groups, contextual inquiries, essentially anything to be getting user insights into in-house that we can start analyzing. Some of the outputs of these activities are things like personas, user activity work product analyses, and business planning activities. And just to elaborate a bit on the business planning activities, you could be doing things like lean canvases there are any number of methodologies you can use, but ultimately the idea is that you want to be translating these assets into things that are actionable for business stakeholders as well. So solution design. Interaction design defines how the design solution works. So activities on that front include user activity articulation, user activity mapping, feature set articulation, and feature set prioritization. You're also going to start doing information architecture, static wireframes and wireflows, moving into interactive prototypes, interaction specs, and micro-interaction animations. And visual design defines how the design solution looks. So things like colors, typography and alignment, proximity, and branding. And as I mentioned earlier, the evaluative research phase is really, the goal of it is to evaluate the efficacy of the design solutions that you've generated. So you can do evaluative research on things like information architecture using card sorting, but you can also obviously do evaluative research on interactive prototypes and things that are higher fidelity. It's really just a matter of the use case. So some of the types of evaluative research that exist, that we do, heuristic evaluation, doing walkthroughs with other stakeholders within the organization, like product management, development, and development leads, assessment and validation usability studies, benchmarking, and very importantly, accessibility reviews. So making sure that the products that you're signing are accessible to all users. Okay, so case study. So I'm going to be focusing on kind of that design lifecycle for recruiting and admissions, and then kind of speaking to how data science and UX collaborate with one another on the project. So the foundational and generative data gathering we did, conducted user interviews, did a pretty significant amount of competitor and core platform audits, as well as had a number of internal stakeholder interviews to build context. And here's, excuse me, here's a snapshot of what we found after I take a drink. So two of our personas that we have here for recruiting and admissions are Rob, the recruiter, and Sophia, a student. The main takeaway here is that 90% of admissions directors are concerned about reaching their goals. We know that the industry is going through times of change for some of the reasons I articulated earlier, which include changing student demographics, policy and funding shifts, evolving student and family expectations, and admissions departments are plagued with data-related challenges because a lot of their information is siloed in a bunch of disconnected places that ultimately makes it inactionable for them. As I mentioned, most admissions directors, the vast majority of admissions directors are very worried about meeting their targets. But the pain points aren't just for the admissions directors. For marketers, they're unable to target and engage with prospective students, parents, and college counselors and other interested parties to grow their applicant pools and win mindshare. They also, for the most part, don't have insights into how their campaigns and events are actually doing in terms of their return on investment and yield. So they can't align meaningfully with other cross-functional groups within the university. Recruiters are stretched extremely thin and are working with many different prospects and admits at a given point in time, which makes it very hard to work surgically and scale their efforts. And lastly, students, as you can imagine, are navigating very dated information delivery formats. They're still getting brochures in the mail, and a lot of different disparate online experiences to try to determine what is the value that they'll ultimately get from the investment that they're making with their time, and increasingly a lot more money with the rising cost of tuition. So solution design. In summary, we know that bringing student data together is ultimately going to be the foundation for everything that we try to do. So connected student data will ultimately power the personalized experiences that students need. Recruiting admissions is also essentially, that's your first impression that the university is making with any given constituent, and it's very important that they get that right. So ultimately, we want students to have the data that they need, the insights that they need to make a really informed decision about, obviously, this really important next step in their life. But we also want to give institutions the opportunity to make sure they're targeting the right students, targeting people that are ultimately more likely to enroll, more likely to persist, and ultimately to complete. Okay, so the data science feature set spotlight. So we're going to be focusing on a single persona right now, Rob, and some of his goals and the way that we were using data science to solve some of his problems in the recruiting admission space. So some of his overall goals, obviously he wants to increase applicant pools. Any recruiter is going to want more people applying. He also needs to be able to identify who's most likely to enroll. So if he has a huge cohort of prospective students or leads, It's very difficult if you just give somebody a list of emails or their phone numbers, or that's not really going to give you any insight into who's actually a good fit for the institution. And when you're operating that capacity, you're essentially always in a reactive space. You're reacting to students applying, you're reacting to inquiries, but you don't necessarily have any of the insights that you need to actually get proactive with absolutely anything. And ultimately, what no student wants to hear from a recruiter or from anyone in an institution, oh, I'm stretched really thin, I have a lot of prospects and leads I'm managing, and that's why I can't really give you the time and attention that you probably feel like you need. There's a lot of schools now that are 70 grand plus a year, you're making a huge decision. It doesn't feel good if you don't feel like the institution is taking the time to actually invest in getting to know you and actually essentially pitching like what is the unique value proposition of that institution. So what would the recruiter need in order to reach those goals? He's got to be able to identify the right prospects, measure and increase his yield, and identify applicant enrollment trends, which again, in a system that in the current state is not integrated at all, you have none of those insights. So how might we enable recruiters to leverage existing data insights to improve efficiency so they can selectively focus on the right prospects? And I probably should make that a little bit clearer. There are existing data insights that aren't necessarily, the data exists in the abstract, but the insights don't because they're not being captured and processed. So the context of use for the design solution is leveraging a couple of the Salesforce products, Service Cloud, Einstein Analytics, but specifically Pardot. And Pardot is I'll make sure I get this right. It's a lead nurturing and marketing automation platform from Salesforce. So it's integrated with the Salesforce platform and the other solution areas that we're exploring. But the lead record that both Pardot uses as well as Pardot uses and Service Cloud would use essentially represents the prospective student as the first building block of this 360-degree view of the student that they're ultimately trying to build throughout the recruiting admissions lifecycle. So if you can imagine, like in the best case scenario, when the student ultimately enrolls, if you're walking into an advisor's office and you've made this decision, you've made this commitment, it would be really nice from the student's vantage point for the data that's already been collected on them to be accessible and actionable from an advisor's perspective. You can see what campaigns they participate in, what events they participate in, and all these insights essentially serve as that foundation to just have a higher touch initial experience. And so there's one specific feature set within Pardot, and so it's a data science feature set spotlight, which is Pardot behavior scoring. So as I mentioned, Pardot is a is a marketing tool, and one component of that, as the university is creating assets like landing pages, email drip campaigns, things like that, the behavior score identifies essentially how much any given lead or prospective student, based on their interaction patterns with the different assets the university has put out there, how likely are they to convert? So how likely are they ultimately to apply? So that's a good thing, not just from a recruiter's perspective, to be able to see, okay, if you're putting somebody into email drip campaigns and you're giving them landing pages and all these things and they're not interacting with them, like probably best to not be spending your time investing in trying to reach out to that student. And from a student's perspective, I don't want people to reaching out to me that don't really know me and it's not a good fit. And I don't want to be spammed because you brought a bunch of random email lists. So Pardot behavior scoring ultimately gives a quantifiable way that leads can then be ranked against one another and assign positive or negative insights based on their type of engagement and their level of engagement. And so how does this help recruiters? As I mentioned, Pardot Einstein is analyzing data from Pardot and Salesforce to show really straightforward scores and insights that ultimately allows recruiters to prioritize their leads by behavior score. These leads, as I mentioned, with higher scores have more in common with leads that have converted in the past. So by using machine learning, Pardot behavior scoring provides a much simpler, faster, and more accurate prioritization solution than traditional approaches, which were not integrated with data at all. And some of the impact from our recruiting admissions efforts, we've seen 29% increase in applications for admissions, 38% yield from commit to admit, admit to commit, enrollment efficiency increases, as well as campaign deployment and prospect volume. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcel. That was awesome. Also, we did inquire about the air. It is turned on the lowest and highest that it could be, so grab a cold drink. It's okay. Thank you so much, Marcel, for sharing the context of like how Salesforce.org came to be and just all the awesome work you all are doing and like how you are using data involved in that process. In fact, speaking about data in the Salesforce.org process, I'd like to invite up our next speaker, Suzanne Yuen, Director of Data Science at Salesforce.org, to share her side about what she does, also with Marcel. Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking this evening to come and spend some time with us. So I did do a little background slide. I guess nobody else did. I was born in San Francisco, so I don't know if anybody else here has kids, maybe, or was born here, has some relationship to being here, possibly. So I was born here. I went to school on both coasts and did some consulting for a while, and now I'm here. So like Michelle mentioned, I lead our data science here at Salesforce.org. So Marcel already covered this a little bit. So just to kind of rehash, we're a combination of multiple things. We are not just technology for good, but we're also looking at how do we invest into making more impact? How do we create that community for our nonprofits and our educational institutes? And how do we maximize that? And those are really sort of the things, because I think we're not a simple institution to explain, right? Because we just do so much. We do cover 3 main areas. So Marcel just covered sort of some of the work that we're doing in our education cloud. But we're also, looking at philanthropy and how do we increase that. And we're also looking at nonprofits. So there are, by some counts, over 1.6 million nonprofits in the United States alone. And considering that we know that a lot of work is going on in other countries to help other constituents, there's a lot more impact that we can have. And so I'm going to highlight just 2 nonprofits and some of their work that I am personally very, very excited about. And just to show a little bit about that. So the first one here, this is a picture of Kibera. Kibera is the biggest slum outside of Nairobi. There are, by some reports, anywhere from 250,000 to 2 million people that live in a very, very small area. They have many, many different sorts of health issues, including HIV, AIDS, lack of sanitation, lack of clean water. There's also this idea of transience. So sometimes the population goes up because there's a lot of migrant workers that are there for seasonality, and sometimes it goes down. But did you kind of catch a little bit of that range? That's a really big range. How come we don't know more about them? How come we don't? Huh? She's seen my dog. I don't have treats usually, but that's exactly it, actually. So the way that we were calculating it before was that we would take images like this one, or aerial images from planes. And we would kind of guess, right? We would look and we would say, oh, that shiny spot, that is a rooftop because it's corrugated sheet metal. And so we would kind of estimate, right? But if you look at this picture here, how many houses do you think are there? And more importantly, how many families do you think are there? And now, what do you think they need? So when we sort of think about this, there's really 3 levels. There's the number of houses and what the houses look like. When you have a fire or some sort of natural catastrophe, if you have no idea about the conditions of the houses, right? So these we're seeing here, this is metal corrugated like sheet metal. This is actually pretty good. When I went there, it was actually a lot of mud houses we saw, a lot of stick houses, things that fall apart when it rains, things that fall apart if there's an earthquake or any sort of other minor things that we would consider to be minor, huge for them. A fire could wipe out a quarter of it and we wouldn't know how many houses were displaced, right? What's the family look like? Is it a mom, a dad, 2 kids, a dog? That's what we think of, right? That's our conception. It's our context for what a family is. But is it there? No. Problem is that we actually didn't have the data for what that context is. We don't have anything that really looked relevant because nobody had actually done a census on them. So we didn't know. And then when we look about their needs, right? how educated are they? Maybe how employed are they? I talked a little bit about one form of transient employment, right? Migrant workers. But there's actually a lot of other sort of informal employment as well. So a lot of women will go and they will get donations of bags and clothes, and actually it might be donations that you have given to some organization here and it gets shipped over there, right? And then they're given these bags of clothes at a low cost so that they can go and become entrepreneurs and sell those clothes as well. And that's considered informal employment, but there's no data on that. I don't pay taxes on informal employment. How do I know who's informally employed? How do I know what their status is? How do I know what they need? And because these are slums, these are in areas where they're not supposed to be. There's no water sometimes. There's no clean drinking water. So how do you get clean? How do you become sanitary? How do you provide for your children? How many children are there? Do they have safe places to go? So these are just a few of the questions that, if you think about your day-to-day and how you live, it's very, very easy to answer, right? Like I could ask you right now, where's the nearest toilet? Well, it's also for everyone, it is around the corner, just so you know. How safe is it? I will tell you, this building is very, very safe. What are the safe places people can meet? What if they want to study? You know, we have public libraries. Do they? There's also a huge issue of gender disparity there. Girls and boys have very, very different situations, potentials, dangers. Rape is a very, very real issue. Violence is a very, very real issue. Having a lighted path to go home after school, if you were lucky enough to go to school, that is also not always a given. And so there's all this context that we need to think about. Because even if we use AI to measure how many houses there are, even if we use historical data to guess at how many people live in those houses and what those constituents look like, we don't know. That's what we want to do. So we went there, me and I think 6 to 8 Salesforce people went there for Salesforce's 19th birthday. We volunteered 19,000 hours in total for volunteer time off. And Salesforce has this amazing system where we're really encouraged to do good, and it's fantastic. And so for part of that, I went with a group there, and we kind of like talked about this. So we created teams with mappers, the people who are very, very familiar with the technology, with locals. So that's actually a local person here, part of the community that's on the far left. And so she speaks the specific dialect that they speak there. And she's also a trusted member of the community. There was definitely times when people would come and yell at us because they were like, what are you doing on my lawn? Are you trying to take my children? It definitely got very heated at some times. But because we had a local community member there, we were able to encourage trust. And because we were also able to have that community member there, we were able to create some resilience with our project. So it's not something we just went and did, but it's something that they can use further and later. I already touched a little bit upon low quality and low quantity of historical data that's actually relevant. So what did we do? We went and we took a census, and we actually asked the people, who's living in your household? How many adults? How many adult males? How many adult females? Are you educated? How educated are you? Are you employed? Are you formally employed, or are you informally employed? Which is very important. And we sampled, and we looked, and we mapped actually, different sanitation conditions, different water conditions, safety. So ultimately, what we find is that there's power in having this data, because now we can actually go and we can advocate for them, and we can give them the proper resources that actually do reflect what they need. we found that over half of all adults there were unemployed females. So what does that mean? It means we should probably give them more resources, right? We should probably help them, maybe education or employment opportunities, right? I already talked, and then we also found that actually a lot of the children were not being educated. So we can push for more schools in that area, or maybe encourage more NGOs that are with that aim to go into that area, right? But now we have that data, and so now we can actually help them in the way that their community needs to be helped, because we have that context now. This is a second project. This is actually a picture of Nepal. So Nepal is very different from Kenya, right? Lots and lots of mountains, very beautiful. It's also kind of cold sometimes. Who's been to Nepal here, actually? Okay, pretty good. But who's traveled to a country maybe that has a lot of mountains? California kind of counts, right? And so something you'll notice about even driving around in California, it's not exactly that easy to get around from one mountain to the next mountain, right? Unless you have a road there, a bridge. You kind of have to go down the mountain, through the mountain, around. It's not direct, right? And that's one of the problems with Nepal. Their existing infrastructure and the mountains, which are absolutely beautiful, makes it kind of hard to reach certain places. They have a lot of remote villages. And so what this also means is that they lack certain infrastructure. Because of the way that the ground is, they are also they have a certain, well, I'll go into that actually. But they also lack solid electrical infrastructure. And what this has sort of shifted is what their economy looks like, what their technological levels look like. And, well, you can also see, okay. And so based on the GDP, you can see that they're not a very rich country. So yes, you could say oh yeah, well, why don't you just fly, right, from one spot to another? So for instance, you can fly from Pokhara back to Kathmandu and it only takes 30 minutes, but it's actually an 8 to 12 hour car ride to go through the mountains. The problem being that flying is prohibitively expensive for most locals because they make $835 per capita on average, right? So there was an earthquake in 2015. And I don't know if anybody remembers this. This was a pretty big deal back then. Okay, I'm getting some nods. This is great. And there were actually a few. And because of the way that their land is, they had many, many, many landslides. And this actually changed the entire geography of the country in the sense that roads that you thought, so for instance, if 101 just disappears right now, how do you get to San Jose, right? If the BART demolishes because the tunnels go out, right? Your existing infrastructure is gone. How do you get home? Or how do you visit your friends and family? Or what if that hospital that you really need to go to is on the other end of that road that no longer exists? And if we're the government, how do we know what exists or doesn't exist? Because our existing infrastructure wasn't great. So that's where drones came in. One of the nonprofits that went in actually had this whole idea of let's empower the local Nepali people with drones. And so what they did was they worked with them to sort of create these different projects. So one of them was, for instance, looking at hospitals, flying over to villages that were very remote, very difficult to reach, and looking at them to see how bad is the damage and how do we get you the supplies that you need. And additionally, another cool project that they also did was they mapped out the new terrain, right, because we have been landslides which basically created new geography. But then they said, let's use math, let's use predictions, and let's figure out what future landslides might look like so that you don't build your house where there might be a landslide in the next earthquake. So they work with a lot of local governments and a lot of local institutions, and this really increases trust, right? So you're building that as you go along. The nonprofit also actually only trained about 6 people. My friend is actually one of the people that was originally trained. And what he's actually done since then is that he has trained a bunch of other people. The last time I went to visit him, he had 15 new engineers, new AI drone engineers that were there working to create more projects and to create more mapping and to get more information and to build new projects. So now they can scale that out, right? So now they can look at more geographies and say, don't build your house there because we think a landslide is going to be there, because now we've collected that data. They've also become a part of the global group of drone consortium. And so now they're global experts. They get flown out to Japan and China and all over to speak about their work and how they can scale that out, because Japan also has a bunch of mountains, right? And so it's helpful to them. And again, they're leveling up the local. This is about helping that local community, bringing in the local context of what they need, right? And helping to build trust. The other super cool thing, I think, is that they've actually also now started their own companies. And one of them is actually delivering medical needs and supplies. Because again, if you're sick and you need something immediately now, you don't want to wait 12 hours for that bus to get over there for your supplies. You want it now. And a drone can do that. So just to sort of like summarize, you know, what I sort of see as, you know, where the UX, and it's the context, right? It's about having those locals bring in that knowledge. What do they need? Not us telling them what they need, but them telling us. Because I would have never thought like, oh, you know, informal employment, or, you know, like maybe it's a water question, right? Or maybe it's that question of like, where is your vulnerable spots that, you know, there might be a landslide later? That's something they know. And so they have that context, right? And it's about building that community, because we're building this up all over so we can help level up internationally. And then we can help build trust. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I don't know about you all, but I just think that that's like the coolest stuff. It's like bringing in data science to actual people to make giant impacts. Also, I love that training other engineers and the local community to help themselves. Sweet. So thank you both so much for sharing your insights. Up next, I'm super excited to introduce Anna Bethke. Hi, Anna. How are you? Great. The Director of AI for Social Good at Intel? Head of AI for Social Good. Yeah, perfect. Also in the same domain of AI for Social Good, super excited to share kind of some resources and things that you're passionate about and that you work on. Yeah? Hey. Yay. Although I love this little, so good. Yeah. Oh dear, this is dark. Okay. Huh. Oh, that's not dark. Cool. So that would have been intriguing. That's okay. So my main takeaway, if you don't get anything else, and I think we all got it from Suzanne's talk too, because oh my gosh, that was amazing, is that we can all have a very large impact, no matter what our fields are, no matter what our backgrounds, technological, non-technological experience. There's a lot of ways to begin to move the bar for people, for their planet, for animals, etc. There's a lot of different ways to think about, like, one of the questions I always get asked, which I chuckle out about, is like, oh, what is a project that is socially good? Because, yeah, good is something that is somewhat subjective. But, you know, for me and for us, it's often something that helps the well-being of people. So you can think of the basics of life. So making certain that you have food, water, education, jobs, that you are safe, that you are able to move around in your world in a way that's the same as everybody else, no matter what your abilities might be, etc. And, you know, we often clump these into sort of 3 different groups, which is healthcare, earth, and social impact. But there's also, the United Nations has something that's a little bit more distinct, which is called like the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think I have a slide on that at the very end. But what I really wanted to do is sort of dive into these projects, talk a little bit about how they arose, what partnerships like this can look like, because one of the reasons that I often talk about these types of things is to encourage everybody to then go back and say, okay, well, you know, like, what can I do? What issue do I see in the world that I could potentially help with? Or do I know somebody that can use this assistance in some way? And we have examples and stuff. So the first one, going back to Africa, actually, a nonprofit company called Resolve, they came to us and they were trying to solve this issue of poaching, well, trying to move the bar on poaching. And one of the things that they have been working on is this trail camera. It's a motion capture camera. They're often called camera traps because basically they take pictures of anything that's moving in front of it. So this is used by conservationists often to try to figure out what animals might be in an area. So if you're hiking around in some of these beautiful pointy mountains somewhere, you might run across them. But the issue is that they are super sensitive. Basically, they'll go off on a dime because you want to, conservationists in particular, want to be capturing any type of animal that might be in its frame of reference. So it could be something that's just on the periphery of its view, but it wants to capture that still. So there's a lot of noise. And when Resolve was sending the pictures back to the park rangers, they were finding that 95% of the images were not that of people or vehicles. And that's what the park rangers were really interested in, because they're the ones that are out there that are trying to protect these animals. So, you know, a 95% false alarm rate isn't good. They weren't really trusting the system. It was also taking a lot of bandwidth. There's really no Wi-Fi in the Serengeti or the Sahara. You're always having to talk to a satellite radio, which is really expensive, both in terms of money as well as battery power. It takes a lot of battery power to get an image all the way up into space and then into a cloud. So what they approached us with and what we've been helping them with is embed a little computer chip and some algorithms that's able to do object detection on the edge. So now this camera will take a picture and it'll go through a computer vision neural network. And it's a pretty simple network. You know, this is something that you could write in Keras in probably like 10 minutes or something. So it's not novel. It's not anything that's super fast, but it is way more accurate than the baseline. It is very small, and it actually reduces the noise a lot, which is great because now we're, that sounded different. Now we're able to run this and only send those images that the model is most confident that have a person in it. So the rangers now get an image like this, and we have obscured the people's faces for their privacy, but it has a bounding box, and then you get a text file as well that says your algorithm is X% confident. So this basically just gives the park rangers the information that they need in order to hopefully, you know, then deploy their park rangers so that they can prevent the poachers from setting traps, from doing the next part. Yeah. And, oh yeah, I guess the chip is called like a vision processing unit. So it's cool. It's tiny. What I really want to talk about, though, a little bit more than the hardware, sorry, Intel, is all of the people that is involved in this, because it's a lot. You know, Resolve is the nonprofit that is really driving this. And they've brought together a whole bunch of people. So we've been helping them with getting this AI chip and on the edge working and making certain that all these components are nicely integrated and that things run well. There are a lot of different funding resources as well as additional support. One of the cool things is like that little, ooh, does this have a thing? Oh, no laser pointing. Okay, so you see this like, I don't even know what to call it, but right under the Intel AI on the far right, that's the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. Oh, thank you. I really don't need a laser pointer, but, oh, intriguing. This has both. Okay, so this little thing is the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, which means that sometimes when we talk about this project on social media, he'll like retweet it, which is, yeah, anyways. You really didn't need to know that, but it's sort of cool. So I have not met him. I will likely never get to meet him, but you can always hope. Yeah. I don't know where I said that. Okay, so then, Microsoft has been working a lot. There's a cool project called Wildbook. So some of the next models that we're wanting to put on this too is not just detecting people, but detecting lots of different wildlife. So Wildbook is basically a database of a lot of different animals. And a cool thing is with a bunch of different animals, if you have spots or stripes, you can detect individual, they're unique basically, so you can tell one tiger shark from another tiger shark or one lion from another based upon like how its muzzle of like the pattern of its whiskers basically. You can tell giraffes apart often, you can tell zebras apart, so this really helps the scientists who are trying to figure out what's going on in these animal families long term. And so yeah, a bunch of us getting all together to make sure that we build this tiny camera, and then working with National Geographic to deploy them to the parks worldwide. So parks like the Mara Elephant Project. And they are the ones who are figuring out where does this get deployed into the field in the best way so that we can have the most coverage. And, those are all the different people, but, who actually gets affected by this? Because all the ones on this last slide, all the ones on that last slide were just sort of the players making it. But really the people at the end of the day who are affected is the rangers, because they're, now they're getting these alerts. How do they respond to it? Do they trust the system? Do they understand what's going on? Do they know that that it is infallible, that it can make mistakes, that they still need to do their patrols as well? And then another part that is affected is the poachers and the poacher network. And you might be saying, well, poachers should be stopped, but it's complex. And this is it's an interesting complexity because for some locals in the area, like getting bushmeat from these game reserves is how they're able to sustain themselves and their families. And getting bushmeat from a game reserve is also considered poaching. So there's some questions there, well, what is the appropriate action in different things? Is poaching a gazelle the same as poaching a rhino for its horn? And then what's the response? And yeah, so thinking through that, working with individual people, a lot of, locals will be affected, villagers, et cetera. And, they're already being affected both by just the existence of the parks for good and for potentially bad, the existence of bringing in these autonomous systems. One cool thing actually that we're also doing with the system is that issue with the local villages often is that you basically, oh gosh, and I don't know if I have you can maybe see it in the background here, is that often these villages where they keep the cattle have to be surrounded by like very high fences because You'll have elephants that will charge these fields or the fence area, or you'll have tigers that and lions that come in and try to get the livestock because the tigers are hungry. So one of the things that we've been thinking about for, a next generation is something called like lion guard or elephant guard, etc. So basically, same idea. You have a camera. It has like a line detector, and if it sees a lion like approaching and getting too close, it sets off an alarm, hopefully scaring the lion away. And then the villagers' cattle are safer. So it's interesting, like these small tweaks can have a really large impact. And of course, like the wildlife, that could be very well impacted. Another problem that we've been working to help solve is that of accessibility. So a company called Hubox, they're based down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and they're a robotics company. And the founder came to us because he had an idea for an AI-assisted wheelchair where you would allow somebody to use their own facial gestures to be able to control the wheelchair. And this was all very much possible with their expertise in robotics. They built this little, I don't know if you really can't see it here, but there's like a cool little device that sits basically on the joystick of a wheelchair. And that's commanded by this, there's a tiny computer back here. It's like a 8x8 inch computer. I think it's called like the Nook. Oh yeah, look at all the R's. It's that NUC. I'm a little punchy tonight, sorry. Okay, so the Nook is really cool. It has a customizable board, etc. And then what we did is, just train this neural network, which is able to take different facial gestures of a lot of different people and a very diverse set of people. And this is something that Hubox was also adamant about, which I was very happy to see. And they work with people, the users as it goes out into the field to make sure that it works, because if you are commanding your wheelchair to stop, you need it to stop 100% of the time for really, important safety reasons. And then the facial gestures themselves are collected with a 3D camera. And the reason that we're using a 3D camera is because it's able to get those facial gestures just a little bit more than a 2D camera. And especially like if you move your head a little bit, etc. And then the user is able to choose whichever gestures are easy and most natural for them. So if smiling is hard for whatever reason, they can choose something else. Or for me, we are doing this at a demo, and smiling was set as the default to go forward, and I smile a lot, so it was really hard for me to stop commanding it to go forward. So I may or may not have knocked into some people and possibly into a display or two before they were able to use the application to stop me. Anyways, that would not have been my preferred, go forward command. Probably stopping would be good for me. Yeah. So, there's a lot of potential players. So there's, Hubox and ourselves working on this technological capability. It can work on almost any wheelchair. So, don't have to work with the wheelchair companies. But the main people that are affected are the wheelie users. So that the person who now is using it to command themselves around instead of whatever apparatus they were using beforehand, which are often quite invasive or expensive or both. And healthcare and continual care providers. So a lot of individuals might have a full-time support, whether it is a family member or like a healthcare provider. Health insurance companies too, potentially. They might be footing the bill for this. That's going to have effects. Yeah, thinking of them too. And then potentially in the future, like environment designers. At the same demo showcase, the wheelchair was having some issues originally because we had a lot of like these blue blinky lights and these blue screens because we like the color blue a lot. But that wasn't really something that we had trained the neural network on beforehand because we were in, natural light or office light, which isn't, blue blinking lights all the time. So we had to do some adjustments there to like make certain that it worked well. And that was more on our training to make certain that, everything was diverse. But there could be something in the future too where you want to make, well, right now there's a lot of issues with wheelchair accessibility just in general, but yeah. So I'm going to go through these really quick because then we'll have like a little panel. So basically what happens in a lot of these is that a group or an individual approaches us with an idea. Then we provide hardware samples, funding, and then like support everywhere from like hardware, software, data science expertise, basically. And the projects can last from anywhere from like 6 months to multiple years. That TrailGuard AI one has been going on for a while to make sure everything goes right. And there are a lot of hurdles along the way that happen. One of the big ones is getting all the right partners together. I was having a conversation with Kathy and some others about like, are these sort of internally grown or working with a partner? And I was a data scientist before this, and it's really easy to go what I call down the data science rabbit hole where you're like, oh, there's this really big issue. Right now I'm sort of interested with bees. And bee mites are bad. So, okay, I could, curate a data set of mites on bees, and then I could create like a computer vision algorithm that, detects these mites. Anyways, I basically go all the way down this rabbit hole, and then like, oh, well, how is this going to help? To be really helpful, you actually have to work with like beekeepers and to see, like, is this something that is useful for you? How would you actually use this at the end of the day, et cetera? And so having lots of conversations about how are you going to use this system? What is the actual problem that you're facing? What are the current strategies that you're going about now? And is there a way that tech can actually help? Or is there a solution that doesn't involve technology that's actually better at the end of the day? Because that can also be the answer. And that answer is totally chill and is, sometimes even better. And fully understanding the problem, like what are the issues that you're facing? And then knowing if a solution can help. Because like, I can say, oh yeah, like it's possible that tech can help in this way, but is it better to do X, Y, or Z instead? And then, logistics, stuff like legal agreements, funding, staffing, time, data rights. All of those, super important, can take a really long time. Yeah, I haven't found a right helper for that one, but the other ones, there's a growing community of this, which is awesome, as well as a lot of open source data and algorithms. There was an individual who actually mapped out some of the communities that are out there, as well as initiatives, events, data, et cetera. So, and they put it out in a mind map, and I believe you can actually add stuff to it too. But you can play around with it, and it's cool. I like it. So I will leave it up for one more second while people take pictures. Okay. Oh, of the meetup? Oh, gosh. ML+UX SF. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. I should have put this on here. And then this is my, list of some of like the volunteer organizations that are great, and there's a lot more out there. But basically, if you want to get your feet wet in this area, there's a bunch. Delta Analytics is one that's in the SF area, and I couldn't recommend them more. Basically, they'll pair you with a nonprofit, and you'll work on a project for 6 months with 3 other people. So really get a deep dive into a particular project. DataKind is awesome. They're more globally distributed. Data for Democracy is something that's a little bit more online via Slack. I don't know as much about Code for America, but I've heard they're awesome. Visualization for Good is a cool one, especially if you're a visualization person. I think a lot of what they do is on Twitter. At least that's how I've seen it. OVO is a new one that I heard about. One of the cool things that they did is they scraped GitHub, and basically a bunch of these nonprofits have open source GitHubs, and they have populated a list of tasks from the issues on those GitHubs, so you can get started right away. And Omdena is sort of a mix between data kind and driven data, I would say. Driven data is sort of like Kaggle Data Science for Good. They run data science competitions that are specifically only for good. And then Omdena, they run these like longer term challenge-y things, but I guess like not in a challenge sense. Sorry, I'm not making a lot of sense on them too, but they're a new one and they're quite interesting. And then one question I always get is like, hey, you made a career in this. I want to do that too, which is awesome. And I think you should. And beyond, like one of the resources that I like to point people to is Tech Jobs for Good, because it has a whole bunch of jobs that are in the socially beneficial space. And they also have a newsletter, which is lovely, and Twitter handle, etc. So, sorry, I'm going over a lot. But this is one thing that I wanted to point out is that especially for these types of projects, but for all projects in general, there's a lot of considerations around ethical or responsible AI. This often boils down to like 5 different pillars: fairness, accountability, privacy, transparency, and human rights. But there's others. This cool circle over here is each one of these circles is one of these things. So here's privacy, accountability, etc. And they do have more things like human control of technology, and this comes out of Harvard. And what they did is each of these folks is a principal document. So you got the IEEE on here, you have ACM, you have, do you have companies? I haven't looked at this for like a week or two. Private sector. Oh yeah. Okay. So here we have different companies and like Google's, etc. And each one of these circles indicates if it's covered. Yeah, there's a lot of really great ones out there. So look at them, emulate them. Yeah, do it. That's good. So yeah, this is my last slide. Just some basic resources. One of the things that I actually found really helpful to think about too with all the AI ethics is that there are a lot of toolkits out there and it's growing. So I wrote a blog for myself / anybody else who cares to read it on some of the various ethical toolkits. What they are, how they might help you, and they go everywhere from very simple checklists like Xeon to some that are very algorithmic heavy like IBM's 360 algorithmic toolkit or the Google's What If tool. And then these other stuff, the AI developer program and AI builders, they both are there to help connect either individuals or AI builders as more startups to intelligent resources. So this is one of the ways that I've found helpful to get people access to either cloud credits, which is free for anybody. Hey, I'm sorry. Okay, that was a butterfly moment. Give people access to, cloud credits as well as we have a lot of courses online and hardware samples, etc. And then you can reach out all those different ways. And I think that's it. Those are the SDGs. I know I said about them, so, but now I want to go back. Oh, it worked. Cool. That's it. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Marcel and Suzanne up too. First off, I would like to, do you need any water or anything? We're going to have a little conversation if that's cool. Can you hear me? Is this still okay? Yeah? Here, this one's for you. Yeah. Oh, yes. Sweet. All right. So yes, if you need to know, so that's totally okay. I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I know that all of us have lives and a lot of us have kids and stuff, so just really appreciate your time. So thank you for all of you who are sticking around. We just did that. We are going to move into the panel portion. We'll still end around 8:20-ish, and so that way you will still have time to meet other cool folks and get their number for coffee. We have a couple of pre-prepared questions for our panelists, some frequently asked questions that they typically get that you probably have too. I've already seen them come through on Twitter. And then we will move into open questions. You can tweet those in at ML+UX SF. Just a little bit of background why we choose to do this. We really want there's a bunch of really interested, excited folks in the audience. They want to go back to their teams and be like, oh my God, I don't know about you all, but I saw some really cool talks today. I want to go back to my team and share these resources, especially about the unique domain that you all work in AI for Good and nonprofits. Also, like the unique challenges that you all face too. So really, what can we bring back to our teams? That's kind of what we're sharing. Yeah, sound good? Okay, I suppose I can sit back down. This is us. Hello. This is what we look like. Cool. First, I want to say thank you all so much. It has been such a pleasure working with you and hearing all of the cool stuff that you work on. It is a huge treat, by the way, being an organizer of this and then getting your friends to talk about their awesome work that they do. So thank you all so much. Let me pull up the questions really fast. Cool. So thank you all so much for your time. You all work on really, really interesting things. And a lot of us in the audience are designers or data scientists or machine learning experts or UX researchers. And one thing that I really appreciate is that you all are working on AI machine learning problems for people. Could you speak a little bit about what it actually looks like especially the Salesforce.org folks, about working together as a data scientist, director of data science, and principal UX designer? Like, how do you both work together? What does that look like? Does the domain change?
Yeah, so Marcel and his team have been amazing. They're just some of my favorite people in the company. Don't tell the rest of the company that. But we rely on them very, very heavily, especially in terms of the personas, like what we had seen before. So in the nonprofit space and in the educational space, we see that our customers and our constituents and people that we serve are actually quite different than the for-profit. We have a term called the accidental admin, and that's somebody who basically has sort of accidentally rolled into the Salesforce admin role. They maybe started as a volunteer, or maybe they were going to, let's pretend, the SPCA, after school, and somebody said, hey, you're pretty good with computers. Can you do the Salesforce thing for us? And they said, okay. So they kind of became an accidental admin. And this has a lot of implications in terms of when we look at and when we think about products for them. Because our for-profit customers tend to have entire teams that are dedicated to our products and that are dedicated to some of the processes. But our accidental admins or some of our other nonprofit customers, they're a little bit different. And they also tend to be super swamped. So going back to the SPCA, if your boss comes up to you and is basically, hey, can you put this data into Salesforce? And you can be like, oh, I could do that. Or I could play with puppies. So knowing that and knowing the context of what they're working on, what struggles they're having, what they care about, is all work that Marcel and his team has helped inform my team.
Yeah, I think that the day-to-day varies a lot, obviously. So there's the entire design lifecycle. There's days where doing user interviews, there's days where we're prototyping, but I think agnostic of where you're at in the workflow or what the nature of the project or feature set is that we're working on, one of the things that I think is really impactful and important is to be able to think cross-functionally, because people typically think in terms of the final asset, where's the product requirement, where's the mock-up, where's the specific thing, but they don't necessarily have the context on the why. And inviting other stakeholders, like people that are operating in data science, helps you further upstream to understand and explore different opportunities. We were actually just working the other day on a feature set for recruiting and admissions, and we had already had a kind of an idea of one of the Einstein products that we were thinking about using. And then after talking to Suzanne and giving her more of the context on the why, she was like, actually, you should explore and think about this. And that actually like is a really important, if we had just said, here's the handoff, here are the assets, you guys go figure it out, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to kind of get that upstream insight. So I think that especially having a distributed and remote team, it's really, really important to make sure that we're collaborating early and often, and that people are typically more interested in the context than we give them credit for, if you give them the chance. So.
That's awesome. And it's really cool to hear about how a design and data science team can work so closely together to make products that actually like impact people, like things in education and stuff too. What about you, Anna? What does it look like? Do you work with designers? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that all varies. And a lot of times what I'll do and what we'll do is work with the organizations. And so like they're the ones that have like the UIs or who have the application that they're trying to build. And sometimes I think that's what you meant by designers, is the UI. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, whatever. There's a bunch of different types of designers. There's system designers.
There is a lot of design. So yeah, and which makes it really interesting because like we are often like a few degrees separated from the actual user. Like in both of those examples, it's like we're helping with the technology that is enabling this thing, that is enabling this group to like ship it to this customer or ship it through this other person to the customer. So it's like this chain of intermediaries sometimes I think hinders like getting to know the user a little bit better. It's more, working on the technical parts of it, which I mean, good and bad for sure, but like in having to trust that the organization that we're helping enable is thinking about the users in the right way or helping them to be like poke at them every so often, being like, hey, diversity, and then being like, oh yeah, making certain that it's covered still.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And it also like, we actually got a ton of audience questions during all of your talks about like, hey, this is awesome. Love that you're working in this. Everything from like education to like natural disasters to accessibility. How do you know like when you're done with the project? Like that's a big question that kind of came up of like you're mentioning too, there's always going to be edge cases or more users you can include. What does that engagement look like? Because I think it might be a little bit different than when we're building other types of products.
Definitely moving target. So I think that, Salesforce.org operates kind of in a different capacity than like core platform UX. So we're operating in a capacity where we're taking kind of these Lego pieces from .com, the core platform team for sales and service and marketing and analytics and everything, and essentially trying to configure them in ways that like meet our users, ultimately our users' needs. But those core platforms change 3 times a year. So there's always the moving target on that front. There's always the balancing between, do we build something ourselves? Do we wait for core platform to do it? Are they doing it? And ultimately, the amount of variability in our customers, like the blessing of Salesforce is that it can do anything, like all these different core clouds, but that's also the biggest challenge, right? So I think that there's, I don't remember, it's like 90-something% of Salesforce instances are highly configured by the time end users are actually using them. So I think that from our vantage point, we really think of it more in terms of like creating platforms as opposed to just like the very specific like turnkey point solutions. And that ultimately, like we want to give as much extendability and as much flexibility and customization and functionality available so the customer can ultimately make it their own. So we just kind of give them that starting point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very well put. There's also this other idea of, I think data science is inherently very, very iterative. And that's sort of something that I think is both difficult to explain and difficult for non-data scientists or people who have worked on projects like that before to sort of understand and grasp like exactly how iterative it is. And I think that iterative nature actually allows us to sort of have this idea of constant improvement.
Yeah, totally. And what about the engagement that, it sounds like, if I understand correctly, maybe there's some people in the room that also have this confusion. So these like nonprofits and social good organizations like approach Intel and are like, yo, let's collaborate. We could make something cool. And then you all are like, totally.
Yeah, well, hopefully the answer is totally. It's not always totally. And that, yeah, and it's really hard to be like, yeah, sorry. But luckily, I can then be like, hey, you should go check out this other organization. So I do that a lot, which you didn't hear. But no, it's cool. So yeah, they come in to say, you know, help with a project. And then we often scope with them, like, what are like the deliverables? What is the expected timeline? Because it can be hard to get the right people's time on this. So like with this Trail Guard project, there's, you know, a few people, probably, you know, like a couple dozen people in the company that really know the ins and outs of this like VPU chip and how to integrate it with something new. And so they are pulled in all sorts of directions. So getting like their time can be hard. So having to advocate for that. And I guess like when we're done is like when the deliverable has been met optimally. But there's always times when people might leave that were key to the project, or it's like, hey, sorry, you really got to focus on this other thing, etc. And that can totally be heartbreaking. You know, like doing things for good can sometimes, you know, go by the wayside when other projects take precedent. And I feel like it'd be facetious without saying that, because sometimes that sucks. But what's also interesting with this is like a lot of projects can have a long tail. So there's projects that we, you know, completed multiple years ago that, you know, like we're still providing some support on, like when it's necessary, mostly because we just love these projects. So there's, you know, one or two individuals who are like, oh, I love this thing and keep on doing it. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually going to make a plug for a way that Salesforce.org has sort of approached this that I think is just really amazing. They have these things called, they have a really active community. So going back to my slide, like context and trust and community. They have an incredibly active nonprofit community. And there's a thing called, so anybody who's a nonprofit out there, Power of Us Hub is amazing. But what they've also recently done is they've opened up something called the Open Source Commons. So it's kind of like GitHub for nonprofit projects. And the idea is, yeah, and it gets very cool. It's super cool because it gets involvement from Salesforce.org as an entity, but we also have to have 3 separate nonprofits and stakeholders that are involved in it. So now we know it's a project that the community really cares about and that they're responsible for, but we'll kind of like give them some guidance, but they're like ultimately doing it. So it's projects that they own and they create and they maintain.
That's really, really cool. And kind of like to your point too, Anna, like there's so many people out there. I mean, we had a room full of people who are highly technical and like a lot of us work in tech or even from the nonprofit space or something. And like we work, you know, software development jobs or something, but we are still interested in like volunteering. I know that you put up some resources. This is also great to know. What is the name of the organization, Suzanne?
Oh, that one is the Power of Us Hub.
The Power of Us Hub. What would be other ways that like you could, like if I was say a tech professional who worked 40 hours a week, but like 10 hours a week, I might want to volunteer somewhere. What would you all recommend? Do I need to be, wait, first, do I need to be a machine learning scientist to do AI for good? No. Oh, okay, phew, for sure not. Actually, like the OVO is, one of the things I really like about that is it's a little bit more broad, and I'm not certain exactly how many hours you would need for something like Code for America, but that's a little less ML data science-y. But OVO, it says like, what's your language, what's your specialty, what SDG like resonates most with you, which is cool. And then you can like get matched that way. That's cool. Do you have any recommendations too?
So I think that when you think about volunteering, there's actually kind of a range that you have to think about. So there's what we call, this is going to sound bad, but it's grunt work. So for instance, if I go on onebrick.org and I say, I'm going to volunteer 4 hours to do gardening in Golden Gate Park and pull weeds this Saturday, right? That's something that I can just do, can drop in. It's kind of grunt work because there's really no takeaway. I don't have to commit myself long term. I'm doing, usually it can be physical, it can just be tutoring too, right? You can do drop-in tutoring too. So there's sort of that range. Then on the other side of the range, you have sort of this enablement or pro bono one, where you really take your technical skills and you deep dive into one project or one nonprofit and you say, I'm going to commit to you because I care about your cause and I'm going to commit long term. I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to get to know your context. I'm going to get to know your community. And I'm going to be there to do what you want. I'd like to use my skills. Like, I have a lot of skills, for instance, right? That, like, not me. No, sorry.
Yeah, you do.
I didn't mean that like me, like Sue. I meant that like you as individuals all have very valuable skills, whether they're the design skills or engineering skills or even tutoring in math or helping a student with their college essay, right? Like, you have a lot of skills that you can go and you can pick a nonprofit, like Anna said, just pick one, you know, it can be local, it can be not, and find something that you want to commit to. So those are sort of the big, broad ranges of the spectrum, and there's everything in between. So you can pick your path.
Well, that was onebrick.org.
Oh, yeah, for the grunt. Sorry, that's a bad way to say it.
No, but I'm like, I want to go garden in the Golden Gate Park.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a garden in the city. Sounds like a fun time. Okay, so I have a question for all y'all, more like a favor. Would you mind tweeting out some of these resources after we're done here tonight? Yeah, because there's a lot of really good stuff. And I mean, I did my best live tweeting and so did Kian. Shout out to Kian. But like, this is all so great. And like, it's just, I don't know about all y'all, it's very outside of my wheelhouse and I'm just so thankful for all the resources. How about like another one or two questions and then cool. Okay. So, there is a type of question. Let me see if I can live formulate it because there were kind of three around this. Like the stuff that you're doing is objectively super cool, super useful, and like super impactful for these nonprofits. How do you make sure that the technologies that you develop aren't being used for evil and like this is staying AI for good? And like, do you have any best practices and tips that we could take back to our own practice too?
Yeah. Okay. So it's hard. And I had a discussion actually 2 days ago on this topic. So we're doing a lot of humanitarian mapping types of stuff. So you take a satellite imagery or drone imagery and you figure out where the things are, like usually bridges, roads, rivers, buildings, etc. You could even in some instances figure out where schools are, hospitals, basically, where are people and how do I get help to those people if something disastrous happens? You can figure out where fires, floods, etc. And we are actually engaged in three different endeavors with this. And I'll keep the names of all three sort of generic. One is with a large nonprofit organization that has a reputation for doing good generally in the world. One is for a research institution who also, you know, generally has a reputation for, like doing great things in general. And then the third is, you can tell by my tone of voice, I can tell by my tone of voice, is working with more governmental agencies who also, you know, are very responsible for making sure that there is a proper response. And the technology with all three is very much the same. And, you know, these algorithms are actually already open sourced for the most part. But I told the group, it's like, well, you know, these two, it's like, yeah, we can clump them under AI4SocialGood. This one, even though the intention is good, I don't know what this group is going to do with it, because I do think that, you know, these government agencies who also could use the same technology for something that isn't as great is not so. So it's like, for me, it's like a few different things. Like, does this give me the creepy feelings? If I talk to other people about this, does it give them the creepy feelings? One of a piece of advice that I heard at a previous panel that I've been saying a lot is like, if you are developing a piece of technology, ask as many people about this as possible. Like your neighbors, your friends, your grandmother, your niece, your nephew, et cetera, and get their opinions. And then look for all of the possible ways that it can be used for both good and for not so good. And yeah, sometimes like the not so good is going to outweigh, you know, the good. And then maybe you shouldn't do that technology at all. But sometimes like the good outweighs it, and you work to see, okay, well, how do we talk about this? How do we figure out any ways to mitigate harm using this type of thing? Yeah, et cetera.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky and sticky, and you know, especially with a lot of AI and machine learning, a lot of it is open source. So yeah, but at the same time, like I'm just so inspired by all of the awesome work you all are working on. Suzanne, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Tell her fish story.
Oh,
so she has a great story.
Okay, story time. So there's a university group came to us to get some funding, and it wasn't a lot of funding, you know, but I said no at the end of the day, so that's the spoiler alert, which I think I'm supposed to say spoiler alert and then the spoil, whatever. Okay, so anyways, they're making this underwater drone vehicle, so a UUV, and they're trying to look at the overpopulation of an invasive fish species, which I won't say because then you could like figure out who this group is. They're super great idea of like, okay, using this underwater drone to identify this fish species using computer vision, and then using an automated harpoon to get the fish and collect them from the water. So, yeah. So in essence, they were making an automated weapon, which, you know, it's like, how do you tell a student? Well, we had to tell a student group, like, sorry, we're not going to fund this. And there's some issues of doing this in a way, because what if it goes right? I don't know. And it probably, like the fish are pretty small, so it likely wouldn't hurt a person, but it could probably hurt another fish. I don't know. All sorts of issues.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that so as somebody that's not a data scientist, I'm, you know, very much dependent on Sue and her team to help me make sense contextually of this, like, really a lot of black boxes, right? And I think that there's a lot of general skepticism right now around AI and machine learning and kind of a more measured and cautious optimism from people on the inside and like a lot of fear from the outside. So of all the discussions that I have with Sue, and I think beyond just making sure that your organization has governance structures and something in place to try to, you know, maintain some semblance of social good, balance, all that. But, you know, the discussions we have often are like, okay, how do you strike that balance between if there's that one use case where one customer takes this product and they choose to do something nefarious with it, do we take that away for the other, you know, 10,000 customers? And then in that same vein, you know, that one customer that's making that choice to do something nefarious with it, if they're not doing it with your product, they can probably find something else to do it. And then ultimately, like, all we can do, like, we can say, okay, there's core Salesforce analytics called like Einstein platform things, and part of our role is to step in and say, okay, yes, you could take lead scoring or behavior scoring or some of these things, and if you just handed them that just as a thing, there's all sorts of things they could do for it. But part of our role is trying to make sure that we're giving them something that doesn't constrain them from doing good and doing their roles, but also kind of guides them towards or nudges them towards, you know, kind of more the better side of things.
Yeah.
I was going to add that I think a big part of it, so one of the C's that actually didn't make it onto the screen was this culture. So there's this idea of, you know, everybody that creates a technology and then everybody that uses the technology, but there's this question of like your culture, your, you know, questions. Are you having like those ethical conversations? Are you having those, you know, questions with like your extended family or neighbors or relatives? And, you know, that culture doesn't support you making that choice of, I'm not going to go for autonomous weapons, for instance. right? So having that culture, making sure it's cultivated, making sure you have those conversations, right? I'm on a C-roll. It's really important, and I think that that's this underlying part about it, where that's the seed that grows.
Yeah, and creating a social norm around like, yeah, doing the right thing is the right choice, and like, awesome. Yeah, also just on the futures of AI stuff, there's a really great organization out at Berkeley, CHAI, Center for Human Compatible AI, by Stuart Russell, doing a lot of like, what are these futures? Like, yeah, these are a lot of AI for social good, and like, make sure that it's for social good. So if you're interested, definitely check them out. It is a little bit warm in here. I do want to respect the time and everything too. There are a ton of other questions that unfortunately we couldn't get to. Could you all stick around afterwards if people have other questions they want to follow up with you? Yeah, for a little bit?
Outside.
Yeah, maybe. Outside, yes.
By the water.
So we always love to wrap up with a final question. All of us are practitioners of some kind, and we, I think a lot of us have a ton of really great case studies and insights to take back to our team. What would be like one best practice that you would recommend to all of us? Like if you could just leave us with one piece of wisdom or insight, yeah, what do you think we all should know?
I'll go first. It's, oh wow, sorry. Basically, we all can do good. And no matter what the skill set is. And so I would just encourage y'all to figure out like, what is the thing that my company or myself excels at, and how can that be helpful? What group might need that help? And then try to figure out a way to make it happen. And it's totally possible. And one backstory is that I created this role for myself. So it happened because, you know, I just really wanted to do solely things that were socially impactful. So you can drive the conversation and drive the change.
Awesome.
I would say when you're looking at technology, when you're creating technology, and when you're thinking about it, just don't forget that there's more than just the technology. There's also even questions about, even before you start the technology, right? There's the question of, should we build this? Sure, we can, but should we? That's a really good question. And then there's also, you know, remembering the culture, the context, remembering building community. Like, these are all things that are technically outside of the technical question, but also very, very important.
I think spend as much time as you can with your customers. And I know that like human-centered design and like empathy and all these things have gotten really buzzwordy in UX and have lost some of their meaning. But I think it's really easy, especially if you're part of a large organization, you have a very technical role, to kind of get very much in the weeds on like that singular feature, that singular thing that you're working on, and you lose the context of the overall experience, and more importantly, the like human being on the other side of that that's ultimately going to use it. And even if your job isn't being a UX researcher, even if your job doesn't call for you to spend, you know, hours and hours each week spending time with your customers, I think if you can carve out the time, you know, it can really help to humanize what you're doing and give you, I think, a more meaningful grounding in the way that your work actually does impact, you know, the lives of people that use your product.
Awesome. These are all really, really great insights. And thank you, too, for giving us a bunch of resources that we can go follow up with. And now we're all going to be flooding the AI for social good space, right? Yeah, go team. Okay. Very quickly, I just wanted to say big, big thank you again to Salesforce, Salesforce.org, Intel, all of the ML+UX volunteers. Like I mentioned, I'm the only one up here like emceeing, but it takes a bunch of people to do this. And if you ever want to volunteer, come say hi. Would love to work with you. And also just you. We couldn't do this without you all. So thank you all for your time and from a long day at work, coming and spending your afternoon with us. Really appreciate it. So thank you. And thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Now we can social hour. All right, go meet some other cool folks. Great job.
Thank you so much.
You guys did awesome.